Before I talk about how a planet dies, I think I should define a dead planet. Typically, a dead planet is defined as a planet that has nothing of note happening on or inside the planet. A fun example of this is Mercury. By most metrics, it's a dead planet. Mercury has no moon, no atmosphere, no water, and no volcanic activity renewing the rock. However, Mercury does have a global magnetic field generated by liquid iron in its interior. The only thing Mercury really has going for it is that it orbits the Sun and has a molten core. So for essentially all intents and purposes, Mercury is a dead planet. But I want something a little bit more definitive. So let's look at the interesting ways that a planet can die. When a star like our Sun exhausts its supply of hydrogen, it expands to become a red giant, and our Sun will become around 100 times wider than it is now. It will engulf Mercury and Venus, and probably Earth as well. A planet being engulfed by its star is pretty much as dead as a planet can get. The planet will just be vaporized, meaning there's nothing really left to talk about once a planet has reached this stage. Luckily for us on Earth though, there's about 5 to 5.5 billion years for this to even become a possibility. Another way a planet could die is if it's ejected from its solar system and it becomes a rogue planet, meaning it's not orbiting a star anymore. When a massive star goes supernova, the force of the explosion can eject planets so fast away from the star that they leave their orbits in the stellar systems entirely. A star could also rapidly lose some of its mass, drastically altering the orbit of the planet surrounding it, and if the conditions are right, the planet could fly away out of the star's orbit. However, many rogue planets are formed early on in their solar systems, and since early solar systems are pretty chaotic places with many interactions between large and much smaller planets, this could lead to some of the planets flying out. Rogue planets are of course extremely cold since they have nothing to heat them up. However, they may have residual heat left over from their formation. They probably wouldn't have any moons either, meaning there'd be a lack of tidal heating, and even if there was water on the planet, it wouldn't be liquid. And even if there was water in the interior, it also still probably wouldn't be liquid, especially if there was no residual heating left. So these aren't really very good candidates for life as far as I'm aware. Another way a planet could die is of old age, and let's use Earth as an example. Given enough time, the core will eventually cool, meaning we have no magnetic field. This would lead to the atmosphere being stripped away, eventually leaving the surface as a barren wasteland, especially because all the water would have evaporated. There'll be no geological activity either. All Earth's geological processes would have ground to a halt. And the temperature difference between each side of the planet would be insane. There's no atmosphere to absorb heat or retain heat. So all that's happening is that the rock is absorbing all the incident radiation onto it, and then as soon as it's out of the sunlight, it immediately loses it. So you have one side of the planet baking hot and the other freezing cold, with probably a tiny sliver of moderate temperature halfway between. But that would actually be changing as the planet's spinning, so it would be weird anyway. There are other ways planets could be severely damaged or changed, but not necessarily die. A good example is giant collisions. For example, there's the collision that formed the moon. Earth clearly didn't die, it's still here and thriving, some would say. We also have collisions that could just tip a planet onto its side. Doesn't mean that the planet has to die, for example. So there are ways a planet can survive damage to it, but I think being swallowed by a star is one of the things that a planet can't really survive. I mainly talked about rocky planets in this video, but what I mentioned also applies to gas planets. For example, if you have the star expanding to engulf the planets, if there's a gas planet nearby, of course the gas planet would be engulfed also. There's nothing to stop a gas planet from leaving its solar system either if its star rapidly lost mass, for example. So, of course, with planets, it's a very interesting topic. I have references to what I was talking about in the description below, and I have my Twitter, website, and TikTok in the description. If you want to click those, feel free, ask me any questions. But that's the end of the video, and I guess I'll see you next week for another episode of me talking about astrophysics.